Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
Full Dominaria spoiler. Finally! We know what some cards in Dominaria.
Yeah, I mean, I've been waiting a while for Yargle, Glutton of Urborg, but finally the other shoe has dropped.
Well, that's a gift to the lingo gods, right?
I suppose, yes.
I'm a Yargle.
Although I don't know if Yargle actually wears shoes himself, though. But yeah, there's actually still a ton of cards to dive into. Is there a particular? I mean, this is kind of an interesting sort of flashpoint. It's not just Magic's 25th anniversary, and the return of Richard Garfield from the design side. The formats, man. Like, they're so sick of stuff going on everywhere from standard, legacy, obviously modern always, and then the new cards coming in with no standard Pro Tour last time means that this next, the next time that there's when the Pro Tour comes up in a couple months in Richmond, it's going to be, there's a lot of potential. I mean, just look at how much this past format kept evolving over the course of the last 4 months.
Oh, I mean, in the course of the last couple of weeks even, right? I mean, we thought we had seen it all, right? Like, oh, well, we'll ban this. This is going to rise. Red certainly came up. And then, I mean, not to detract from Dominaria, but Seattle, man, it's like Standard is a whole completely different format than it was a month ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, right? Like, where do you draw the line of which are completely new decks versus which are new? Like, it's a new balance, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's another win by Mono Red, first ever 18-0 as well, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, the Mono Red deck, to be fair, is a little bit different than some other mono reds we've seen, right? Like 4 extra Kindling Phoenix in the main deck. I think this is the first appearance of Grasping Dunes, which is, probably intuitively could have been a pretty good card. But, I think it's still mono red. You're right? Like, this is just a different take on the same archetype. But, I mean, the breakout of that tournament is a different red deck entirely.
You talking about the 3 copies of Blue-Red God-Pharaoh's Gift?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
There is. I mean, we've seen God-Pharaoh's Gift decks before. Not like this, right?
And, I mean, Warkite Marauder obviously became a staple from day one in the format once people figured out to try using it. However, dude, Fanatical Firebrand is kind of that's kind of awesome tech. It's awesome with Gate of the Afterlife, getting the extra trigger. It's awesome for comboing with Warkite Marauder to build yourself a Terminate. And it's same with Walking Ballista, too, for that matter.
So,
right?
The thing is, I think that just building the Terminate is it's underselling how good this combination is. I was talking to one of my prospective RPTQ teammates last week, and he's just like, Warkite Marauder plus Fanatical Firebrand or Warkite Marauder plus Walking Ballista, it completely recontextualizes the Scarab God in Standard, right? Like, this is a big, big game. It's not just killing the Scarab God, right? It's removing the Scarab God's, infinite resilience, right? Usually the Scarab God is just give me enough time, I'm going to take over in a game. Certainly take over in a game where the other guy's dumping creatures into the graveyard, right? But now, if you can get this combo online, it's not even fair to say that they're playing fair. Like, you're playing a different format, and you're invalidating theoretically the best threat in Standard.
Yeah,
it's just big.
Dude, so what about the Combat Celebrant as a new dimension, right? Like, that's the one that really stuck out to me as being like, oh, okay, instead of any of the uncastable or hard to cast 5-drop type of Combat Celebrant is just the
why don't we
no vehicles given.
Yeah, so for anybody who hey, I had to look up Combat Celebrant. It's 2 in a red for a 4/1 human warrior. So it's very castable, like you just said. If Combat Celebrant
aggressively castable.
It is the same casting cost as Trophy Mage. So if Combat Celebrant hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control. And after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. Wow, when you have cards like Warkite Marauder in your deck, this is a pretty interesting effect. And how does that interact with God-Pharaoh's gift, Patrick?
It interacts real well.
Like real well.
Right, like the fact that God-Pharaoh's gift. Okay, so the part of the problem with Combat Celebrant is that it's so fragile, right?
Yeah.
By the time, like, let's say your opponent kills it, they only have so many kill spells. But in a deck with Warkite Marauder, Combat Celebrant, Walking Ballista, this is a deck that, despite how easy these cards can get value and how cheap they are, your opponent's going to be heavily incented to actually help you fill your graveyard by killing your creatures for you. And then when you drop the God-Pharaoh's gift, getting back Combat Celebrant, let's put it this way. Combat Celebrant loves having the haste, because not only does Combat Celebrant get in there for 4, all your other creatures get an extra attack. Like, that's very often game over.
Oh, it's when they're all giants, right? Like,
particularly
every
if
one of them is a hasty 4/4, at least, right? If it's Walking Ballista, it's even bigger, probably.
In particular, what will happen sometimes is you have, like, say you got a Walking Ballista in play or a Fanatical Firebrand. You can, sack them for 0 mana, and on your last loot to Gate of the Afterlife that'll get you up to enough to be actually able to God-Pharaoh's gift, you discard the Celebrant so that it's coming out of nowhere. Right? Like, you get, like, this is a deck that it's like, whoa, I didn't know you had Time Walks in your deck. What's going on here?
Yeah, this is some kind of archetype. Yeah, I'm obviously looking a little bit forward. I think, like, with Dominaria coming into Standard also, but what are the implications that this puts onto trios, right? So the RPTQ is actually going to be one of the next relevant formats, and it's unified standard, I believe. So even though the Pro Tour is going to be triple format, the RPTQ 1 card pool. So,
well, one of the problems with and this has been the case for a while with the blue-red, whenever people have tried to make various forms of blue-red God-Pharaoh's gift decks, you can't play very many land in a deck like this. And, here we see, like, for instance, Grayson Roberts' list has 22. But what's tough is that if you're only playing 22 land and you only have access to 4 Spire Bluff Canals, then you have to turn to things like Aether Hub. And notice, there's not really exactly a ton of other energy, right? Like, there's Minister of Inquiries, and it's not like you want to be using the Minister of Inquiries energy on the Aether Hub.
Yeah, Minister of Inquiries has a job to do, right?
Right. So, like, this is a deck that it only has, with the, counting the 4 Ipnu rivulets, it only has 15 sources of blue if you count Aether Hub. And you want to be playing them on turn 1. And the amount of red that it only has 13 sources of red, right? Like, you don't want to have to rely on Field of Ruin to fix your mana. And some percentage of the time, you're going to be stuck just sitting here, eventually fixing your mana with Champion of Wits or something. I say all this to say that Sulphur Falls is an interesting addition. I think that Sulphur Falls is kind of, it's not the smoothest with the 1-drops, but it gives you extra incentive to play more islands and mountains and less of the Field of Ruin Aether Hub type of stuff. Anyway, just to untap it, which incidentally makes it easier to drop some of the 1-drops. And besides, at the end of the day, the 2-drop part's the important part. But
that was a smooth return to the Dominaria spoiler there with the Sulphur Falls. I like that. So if you're pulling do you think it's fair to just pull the Aether Hubs for the Sulphur Falls, maybe?
No, because maybe you could. The thing is, the thing that's tough is that you also sometimes you want to use the Aether Hubs to fuel the Minister of Inquiries.
Oh, this is...
So I don't know. That's one I'm going to have to... Yeah, I think you got to test it. I mean...
It's a complicated problem set here.
Right, exactly. I could see it going either way. I could see it being that you want to, I could imagine trimming an Aether Hub to Field of Ruins and Rivulet. Or I could imagine that it's crazy to cut Rivulets and that you really need to cut all the Aether Hubs. Or I could imagine that you only play a couple Sulphur Falls because you just can't get that many more basics in the deck. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of ways to do it.
The Sulphur Falls are hella consistent. That's the thing, right? So their worst case scenario is still pretty good for a deck with this mana construction. And their best case scenario is outstanding, right? So... I think that, just maybe stretching a little bit to get the Sulphur Falls in might be beneficial. But I would just say if it were me in the dark right now, I'd be much more likely to cut Aether Hub than Field of Ruin from some of these lists, because Field of Ruin itself is a fixer, and in fact a fixer that gets basics, right? So it's not... it's not easy. This is like...
It's also a stopgap. It's also a stopgap against Scavenger Grounds, right?
Oh, well, yeah. Scavenger Grounds isn't game over for this deck because they're going to run out of deserts probably at some point. But, it does, slow down Gates of the Afterlife a lot. And if you have the engine online, it could time walk you maybe even twice, right? So that is a card you want to deal with.
I also just think that the aggressive elements of this deck are worth calling out. Notice there's no Cathartic Reunions or Charter Courses. There's just... this deck is much more creatures and curve out, right? It's got... what is this? A dozen 1-drops, plenty of 2-drops. Nothing in the deck costs more than 3, except for the 2 Vizier of Many Faces and then the 2 God-Pharaoh's Gifts that you're not even going to cast.
So,
right, this deck actually curves, fast, is low, and aggressive.
Yeah, I actually really like the non-combo-y construction of this deck. It's very reminiscent of a red aggro deck, right? You've got the Bomac Couriers, you've got the Fanatical Firebrands potentially coming down, hastily attacking on turn 1, and there has been this trend, obviously not in this Grand Prix, but I think it was Jeff Cunningham who was innovating the Walking Ballista tech in Mono Red Beatdown. That's a really interesting way to go, especially it's crazy how kind of 90 degrees standard has turned so recently, but it wasn't that long ago that the green-white Explore deck was one of the decks you have to worry about, and that deck is amazing at brickwalling, small aggro decks. I mean, adding Walking Ballista to fight against the Explore guys with Explore on the stack is really, really valuable for getting guys in. And so this deck has that element even without God-Pharaoh's Gift, right? Just regular Walking Ballista is good in aggro, apparently.
Yeah, the interesting differential between this and a lot of mono red decks is the lack of any sort of red spot removal.
Yeah.
There's Abrades in the sideboard, but this is not a Lightning Strike Abrade Shock deck, which actually kind of brings up a really interesting Dominaria card that came in late. Shivan Fire, red instant, deal 2 damage to target creature. If this spell was kicked, it deals 4 damage to the creature instead. And it's, kicker 4. So it's just like Burst Lightning, it just doesn't face. This card is huge, right?
Yeah, I mean not facing is a thing, but I think the flexibility represented by this card is going to ensure that it sees play.
How many times do you end up in a spot where the blue-red deck or anything, lots of these decks, any deck that would play Magma Spray has to take a good hard look at Shivan Fire, right?
Well, I think...
Or Shock, for that matter.
Well, okay, so I think that there's, 2 classes of decks that play cards. like Magma Spray and Shock currently, right? One class is obviously the red aggro decks. I think that they're not going to be attracted to Shivan Fire as either a main deck or a sideboard card, because if they want a sideboard removal spell, there's better options for dealing a certain amount of damage to creatures.
They also just don't take advantage of the fact that Shivan Fire lets you leverage extra mana. Like if your deck is just long on mana, you're going to flood sometime. Leveraging your mana for extra value, the red deck isn't taking as big of advantage of that. And Shivan Fire, part of what you're paying for is the instant speed, like the ability to kill a bigger creature without relying on Chandra or Glorybringer, being able to do it at instant speed. And the red deck's often not taking advantage of that aspect either.
Yeah, so that's my point. If you're just a red aggro deck and you need to deal 4 after sideboarding, both Chandra and Glorybringer are more consistent options than Shivan Fire, right? But a red-white control deck or like a blue-red control deck would, very likely take a look at this card for the main deck, right? Because they're not necessarily relying on the remove from game aspect of Magma Spray. Maybe they are, right? Like, it's always nice to snag the Scarab God sometimes with, like, team up with a Lightning Striker and a Braid or something. But, like, I think that they really just want to not get hit by that Bomat Courier or not get hit by the Earthshaker Kenra on turn 2. And then later in the game, if they need to kill, like, a Glorybringer or something like that, then they have the option, right? And so I think that those kind of board control or blue-red control decks definitely think about Shivan Fire. But I don't see this as being anywhere near as popular as Burst Lightning was in Standard when Burst Lightning was in Standard. That's my guess.
Yeah, I think the lack of face damage just makes it, and the fact that there's just so much more good competition, right? Like, Burst Lightning was basically only competing with Forked Bolt, and both of those are fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, like, just
they're
like,
so different.
Like Naya Lightsaber, which is a 3-color deck that had access to both Pad the Exile and Lightning Bolt, played Burst Lightning, right? So I'm just, not that we need to talk about Naya Lightsaber. I'm saying, like, that's like had access to awesome removal in 3 colors and still played 2 Burst Lightnings. And, I don't know that deck would have played Shivan Fire, but maybe I'm wrong. Been wrong before. Mostly it just killed Broodmate Dragon tokens, so Shivan Fire would be great at that. That's like 99% of the Burst Lightnings just killed the token.
Right. And sometimes that's enough, given that they were a house of cards trying to make an infinite number of Deceiver Exarchs. However, that's not the only red spell that we've sort of got kind of hit with the cost 1. Skirk Prospector, man. What are your thoughts on Skirk Prospector?
I think they're getting...
Also, how wild is it? Sorry to be... Just how wild is it, the sheer volume of reprints? It's a little bit weird, right? Like, that they have Siege Gang Commander, Skirk Prospector, like the Goblin War Chief. I don't know. I guess it's just surprising to me the number of Goblin reprints that are kind of like sickos.
I mean, there's no pile driver in this stack, is there? Right?
No, but there is the Chain Whirler.
Yeah,
Chain Whirler does not mess around. Jesus.
Yeah. Oh no. The Chain Whirler is a good man, but like back in the day, there was first turn Skirk Prospector, second turn War Chief, third turn 3 pile drivers. You know that draw? like I'm just checking because they're getting a lot of the band back together, and I think that they're like, we really like goblins. Interesting thing about Goblin Pile Driver, though, despite the availability of that draw, many of the highest performing Goblins decks in Standard, the Sayoshi Fujitas and so on of the world, just didn't even play Pile Driver later, right? They still War Chief, they still Siege Gang Commandered, but they cut the most powerful offensive cards in favor of removal. So that style of Goblins, which is espoused by one of the greatest beatdown deck designers of all time, will be available in Standard.
Dude, here's a question for you. How in the world is this an uncommon? I realize it's something that you could say about a lot of uncommons in the set. So to begin with, how about Garna the Blood Flame? This is a 3-black-red, 3/3 legendary creature, human warrior with flash. And when it enters the battlefield, return to your hand all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from anywhere this turn. And also, other creatures you control have haste.
Yeah, so...
What the hell?
I'm just going to parse your question in a different direction, I think. Is that, like, this is an odd number of abilities and an odd amount of complexity for an uncommon, right? Like, it's
it's just weird that there's like, what is there, like 10 mythic rare, like, complex designs at uncommon? It's kind of wild. Whatever. I could see why you just want a regular part of the experience to be, like, this card does seem dope. I'll have to see how it plays. It just seems like it has a profound impact on the game to be ubiquitous, but whatever. Should be interesting. Do you think this card has any chance of competing with the big ones like Glorybringer, etc.?
I think that this is close to 0. Maybe not 0. The problem is every part of this card, other than the number in the bottom right, I want. I just don't want it at that cost. That's the thing, right? So
the
just
cost?
Like, yeah, 5 mana. It's just.
Wait, whoa! Why are you paying 5?
Garnet.
Why wouldn't you pay 7? With Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. 5 white-black legendary sorcery. You may cast a legendary sorcery only if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. Return all legendary permanent cards from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Oh, so we're beast bidding here. We are just bidding on legends, and we're going to hastily win the game.
Yes.
All right.
And some of the things that combo with filling your graveyard for Glorious Rebirth can be used to sideways backup plan, get a draw 3 out of your Garna the Bloodflame.
Oh, no. I'm going to completely...
Remember, Garna the Bloodflame returns to your hand, so you get it coming and going. Right? Like, you can do it both ways.
Yeah, like, you could just play down and, like, make them deal with your guys, right? Your hasty guys and and Garnet also just, like, because it has flash and... I guess it's, like, very Crypt Angel-y, right? So... Yeah. I played a lot of Crypt Angels, so I guess maybe I would play Garna.
Oh, well, hold on. Let's keep going. What about Shalai, Voice of Plenty, as another one of the legends that you're getting back with your glorious... Right, like the glorious... what is it? Glorious Primeval Rebirth? Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. If you get back both Shalai and and Garna, now they can't even just kill Garna, right?
Well, yeah, because Shalai gives all your other creatures hexproof.
And what's more, you've got redundancy for flash, right? You can play, because you want to be careful about playing just 4 copies of every random legend, right? But you can play some Garnas and some Sammets. Like in terms of having 2 different legends that you don't want to pay 5 for, they give haste to all your creatures. That's kind of interesting.
I think if I were playing this Primeval's Glorious Rebirth deck, I would be summoning 4 Garnas, right? I think that's I probably have 4 copies of both of those cards.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of dope legends, and you can only play so many. Besides, you really want to be, like, looting some of this stuff away, right? The question is, what are the best?
So many tools, right? Like,
we do.
We've got charts, we've got plannings, we've got red cards. There's no shorts. Actually, on the subject of red cards, I actually want to go back to a card we talked about a few weeks ago, Flame of Keld. I should actually look up the person's name messaged us on our Facebook page. All right.
Yeah, the Flame of Keld seems like it's at least worth a test, right? Like, that's a really good idea. Being able to leverage discard your hand for upside is already, like, it's kind of like, okay, I'm interested. But it's actually really convenient on the following turn, getting this giant burst of card draw, right? Like, it's the order you wish Breakthrough was in.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's exciting. I think there's a lot of competition, and Legacy's a hard one to break into, and maybe there's somehow that this, like, works in modern Dredge, but I mean, at least I'm skeptical, but I would totally give, I'll kick the tires on it for sure. And it's possible because it's too hard to like. There's just so much competition, but it's too hard to predict because this has the potential to be great, not just good.
Yeah, I mean, is there nobody's Icarating anymore? Are they? That's not a thing.
No.
But I mean, if you just got anything in your opener, right, when you go Flame of Keld, like a Stinkweed Imp or something, the fact that you could burst 3 draws on turn, I guess, whatever turn it is, turn 2 or turn 3. That's probably a pretty big Dredge game, and maybe you can set up your finish right then and there.
I just think it's so much harder without Dread Return.
Well, yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to throw out...
That's a great suggestion. That's super dope.
Yeah, so props to Sergio Pinheiro, who messaged that to us on the Facebook. So, cool idea. I think it is totally worth a test, and I personally... feel like a goober for just missing Flame of Keld, because my calibration is always just to think fair. And I forgot that Magic is so unfair sometimes. Like, half the good decks are unfair. So, yeah. Fair Flame of Keld, not maybe that exciting. Unfair Flame of Keld, probably going to ruin the tournament.
So here's a thought for you, man. Diligent Excavator. Let's see where your mind goes with this one. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 human artificer. Whenever you cast a historic spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So, Diligent Excavator is a little bit of a Minister of Inquiries for the historic. The discriminating historian.
It's an Omen speaker for librarians.
But the thing is that I think it's kind of Minister of Inquiries in that even though it costs a mana more, it has virtual haste sometimes, and you can proc it multiple times, because remember, each artifact will count as a trigger as well. So there's the 2 places I see immediately with this are, first, some sort of a Gate to the Afterlife, Bomat Courier, Walking Ballista, God-Pharaoh's Gift, like any kind of a deck full of artifacts in that way that would appreciate being able to self-mill. That's one part.
So basically the deck we were just talking about being a breakout deck at the Grand Prix last weekend.
And you never know. There's not a trivial amount of Artificer synergies in blue-red that use lots of artifacts, So in addition, though, the sort of Garna, the Bloodflame, Glorious Primeval's Glorious Rebirth deck we were talking about. Like, for instance, if you got one of these in play, you play Garna the Bloodflame. For playing Garna the Bloodflame, when you cast Garna, it puts a trigger on the stack, you mill yourself, and then when Garna resolves, even if not a single creature went to your graveyard, you would still get to draw not a single creature went to your graveyard naturally, like in the course of the turn. You'd still get to get the creatures back that you mill from your excavator here.
Yeah, I mean,
right? Like the timing works out. The timing works out right.
Historic is such an interesting ability. I think it's going to take a while to internalize all the historic synergies. Because in my head, I'm thinking I need to play a lot of artifacts for historic, right? But that's not the only thing that's historic, right? Like anything legendary is historic, so this is super synergistic with the other combo we were talking about.
Yeah. Plus, you can combine those, right? Like out of nowhere, you could just drop, so for instance, imagine that you drop a Mox, right? Like you've got the Mox Amber, and that you're going to surprise them because on turn 2 you played the Excavator, they didn't think too much of it. And then on turn 3, you play a Legend. Well, if they can't stop, and then you mill yourself just to get the party started. On turn 4, you might drop Mox Amber, mill yourself, drop Garna, mill yourself, and then draw 3 extra cards. And you're not even doing your combo yet. You're just valuing them out. Or what if you drop a Song of Freyalise? Song of Freyalise could potentially give you a lot of burst mana in the form of, if you've been playing out some cards, you might just surprise, here's Song of Freyalise, I'll tap, like my Excavator and whatever other creatures, whatever other little cantrippy or just like utility creatures you've got, and then you get a bunch of mana and you trigger the Excavator anyway, since it's a saga.
Yeah, so
Song of Freyalise is a saga.
So you have so I'm just gonna plot this out. You've got the Excavator in play on turn 2, right? Theoretically, you play your 3rd land, cast Song of Freyalise, you have 1 mana open, and then the Excavator open. The Excavator triggers because Song of Freyalise is a saga. It's an enchantment saga. And then you have access to 2 mana, right? Because Song of Freyalise gives the Excavator the ability to tap like a Llanowar Elf, right? So
yeah, but I'm saying you might want to wait and drop the Song of Freyalise in the turn you're going to do your big turn. Do something else on turn 3, and on turn 4 you can drop the Mox Amber and Song of Freyalise and Garna, and then draw 6 or draw 4 or whatever. Because Garna makes it so that you want to have the ability to self-mill in the same turn as much as you can. It's always good to just be milling yourself if you've got the Primeval's Glorious Rebirth, just preemptively dropping the song and just, getting some mill going. I'm just saying that the song's another way that you can potentially mill yourself for virtual 0 mana in the turn that you drop Garna.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Garna is even if you're only drawing 1 or 2 cards, that's still pretty valuable, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how many extra cards do you need to draw? To get your money's worth, right?
You're literally advancing on the battlefield while you're doing this. Nobody is so scared of a 3/3, but while it's drawing you a bunch of cards while you're actually doing other interesting things with your deck, I think might be a little something there. Might be.
And what if you're discarding okay, so it takes a little bit of mana, but what if you have say you have that you champion a Wits, right? And you discard a couple cards. Now those count as cards that went to your graveyard from anywhere this turn, and you Minister of Inquiries. Those count as cards that went to your graveyard this turn, and then you use your you loot away with the Gate to the Afterlife. Those count as cards that you drew this turn. And then when you God-Pharaoh's Gift your Garna, suddenly you're drawing so many extra cards that even if they can stop the God-Pharaoh's Gift, you've got every card, you've got 6 extra cards to follow up with.
That's so weird. Because half of me is just wow, drawing extra cards is awesome. The other half is I kind of wanted them where they were.
Well, you don't at the end of the day, you don't necessarily mill every single creature at the same time, but once you God-Pharaoh's Gift, you don't really need all those creatures in the graveyard anymore. You mainly just need them there to get your Gate to the Afterlife on the line, right?
Oh, sure.
You want at least 1 down there, and you want to be able to get more down there later, but you don't need to have a huge supply once you got the God-Pharaoh's Gift in play.
That's fair. I mean...
Okay, here's a different Reanimator type of thing that really has me intrigued. Muldrotha the Gravetide. 3, and this has got Michael J. written all over it.
Why? Because it's profligate green-black top right?
So 3 black, green, blue for a 6/6 legendary creature elemental avatar. During each of your turns, you may play up to 1 permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. So, and if it has multiple types, you get to choose which one this is counting as. So, if you have Muldrotha, you can just immediately play an Evolving Wild out of your graveyard or whatever, right? Or a fetch land if you're playing a more powerful format. And if you have Muldrotha, in any land you happen to self-mill, right, you can just play it out of your graveyard. you can just play a creature out of your graveyard. You still have to pay its casting cost, but it's like you drew an extra card, and instead of playing a card from your hand, you can just play it out of your graveyard. And remember, this doesn't have any of the Yawgmoth's Will type of stuff that exiles your stuff. You can just keep playing stuff. And like once a turn, and you can play a Planeswalker out of your graveyard. That's a powerful dimension. And you can play artifacts out of your graveyard. They can sometimes even net you mana, right? Like you can, like with Mox Amber, you can be consistently getting an extra mana each turn because if you have 2 Mox Ambers, you can tap one, play the other, and the first one goes away. And then the next turn, tap that one, play the other, right? Like you can just consistently get an extra mana out of your Mox Amber in the graveyard. And the ability to just play, I mean, you could, if you have oodles of mana, it's not going to come up very often, but if you have oodles of mana, you can just start playing stuff, right? Like let's say that you had 2 Oath of Ajanis, right? And you had Oath of Ajani, and then you play another Oath of Ajani in Legend Rule, the first one. Well, now you can just play Oath of Ajani each turn. And if you were playing, say, Oath of Teferi is a heck of a card to be able to just play an extra one each turn. And if you're playing a more powerful format, because I think you could theoretically, I think Muldroth of the Gravetide is not a for sure no in Modern. But Oath of Nissa each turn, that's dope. Right? Like, that's exciting.
Oh, sure. I mean, the thing that's cool about this card is, I'm not sure what we have for options in Standard, but I was just thinking, like, Seal of Cleansing, kind of Seal of Doom type cards, right? Where you can get constant exchanges.
Seal of Fire?
Yeah. So, because the thing is, like, the trick on Muldrotha is that they're letting you play permanents, right? So you can't play instants and sorceries out of your graveyard. So they're like, because I think that would be confusing. Or like, you know, typically when you have this kind of ability, then they make you remove it from game. They're like, oh well, we can get around that by just making it permanents. But if you have exchange permanents like seals, then you kind of break that inherent limitation of the card. That you can just get removal out of the graveyard, right? So I think this card seems pretty cool. Like if you've got anything from Walking Ballistas, I mean, Evolving Wilds is the most obvious, but Evolving Wilds every turn is really powerful, in fact, right? I think that this is probably a must-kill for anybody who wants to play a long game. But yeah, Ballistas, any kind of seals. I mean, obviously, creatures and ultimate planeswalkers are like oftentimes folks are just going to kill a planeswalker as soon as they see it. Yeah, I like this card a lot. I think it's very interesting and powerful.
I mean, you could, like, if you've got a Chalet already in play, right? Like, there are so many sick legends in this set, you know?
Oh, that's interesting. So
yeah, think that one through.
Well, right? I was just thinking because the condition is only on each of your turns, so you don't get Graveyard Flash. Like, can you imagine Graveyard Flash? That'd be pretty cool. But you don't get that.
Other stuff you could play, you can get back, like, there's so many artifacts from Kaladesh block that you can sack for profit. You already mentioned the Walking Ballista, but, I mean, what about any of the, like, you know, I mean, this is getting too fancy, but you know what I mean? Like the Metal Spinners, Puznot. But, like, what about stuff like just getting back Heart of Kirin? Because sometimes your Heart of Kirin dies, because otherwise your opponent does.
It's only the two options, right?
Right. I mean, I don't know. I just. And what about if you have any legend, or if you have any legendary enchantments, right? Like, obviously, sometimes you end up in situations where Search of Azcanta ever flips, but like, if you've got some kind of whichever one you want, but one of those in play, Search of Azcanta probably not the natural fit with this, but like whichever of those legendary enchantments, you can just start. I mean, you can get back one. That, like, let's say you had one and then you ended up flipping it, or it got destroyed or whatever. Being able to get those back is like, I don't know, that's more value. The fact that you can just like get several cards back at once makes it so that not only is it potentially a couple cards up at the beginning for a hard to kill card, like if you play Evolving Wild and maybe one permanent out of your graveyard. But if you ever untap, you're just like effectively drawing 4 cards a turn. So your draw phase plus like 3 out of the graveyard.
Yeah, having not played Muldrotha, the Gravetide yet, I'm just wondering, is this card like hyper synergistic with maybe like the good cheap Explore guys, right? Like those guys.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, they're binning things, right? They themselves are relatively fragile, right? They're putting lands in your hand, which might be the kind of lands that you might want to combo with Muldrotha. Like you could easily just get an Evolving Wilds with an Explore guy, or maybe like one of the lands that sacrifices for a cool ability, right? Like some sort of a desert or something, or a cycling land, right? And that those guys are really good at bridging the early turns while fixing your draw. You're going to be very happy to bin like medium cost, powerful permanents for the point when you have Muldrotha later. And I don't know. I think I just want to play with Jade Light Rangers and Branch Walkers and the black equivalents. Those guys are all in the brain for me. So. What do you think? This guy's sure friends with Vraska, right? Like,
yeah,
they're people.
Yeah, it's tough with. Yeah, you can only play so many 6s, and that's. But like, I don't know. I think that it's super reasonable. Like, for instance, if you top out your deck with, let's say you can only afford 2 6s, one of these and one Vraska, or say you can afford 4. Like at a certain point, you calmly woods it up, and you just start overloading on the 6s, playing the ramp and overpowering people. I'm excited about this card.
I'm just trying to think about how to get the ramp cards into the graveyard and then get them back with Muldrotha. I don't think there's a very good way. But in fact, though, like if you're going to go ramp, I mean, just to riff on that Explore idea, like exploring a Spring to Mind into the graveyard isn't bad, right? Like that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I just don't think maybe it's hard to get Spring to Mind and Muldrotha going together. I think it could be. It could be. I'm suspicious.
I guess
I'm profoundly suspicious.
You kind of need Spring to get to Mind / Muldrotha. So if you're bending Spring, maybe you're setting yourself backwards. I don't know.
I was thinking, is there any possibility that Tezzeret is actually the accelerator that we're looking for?
Tezzeret?
Yeah. Right? Like that's a little bit different of an angle. That's a way to accelerate.
Friendly. Yeah, I mean, he is.
Is it friendly?
He's not friendly. I mean, I guess you could just go Tezzeret straight into Muldrotha. Like that's
right. And
Tezzeret is plus one of those little lotuses, and then the next turn, 5th land, probably another lotus, like free mana. Actually, maybe you just go 2nd lotus, cast Muldrotha, Evolving Wilds out of the graveyard for additional value. Right? That's super. Tezzeret implies Muldrotha. Actually, you're right.
And Tezzeret works well with your Renegade map. You can get back the Renegade map and the Walking Ballista in the same turn if you just say the Ballista is your creature, right? And it's not like Karn is any slouch, right? Like Karn is a pretty sick card to begin with, and if you've got a bunch of Tezzerets and Renegade maps and Walking Ballistas, suddenly your Karns, the XX. Construct is starting to look super attractive as well.
So I like this shell for some aspects of it. I think like just imagining how I might implement this shell and being like, oh, right, probably be very, very resilient against mono red, have a pretty good proactive game plan myself. But I what are we going to do to bury the over the tops, Patrick? Because God-Pharaoh's Gift is not going to play while we're messing around with our getting Muldrotha into play, right? Like our little guys are not going to scare God-Pharaoh's Gift.
I mean, what? How did they get the God-Pharaoh's Gift in play? Like, I mean, God-Pharaoh's Gift does some stuff, but so does Muldrotha, and Karn and Tezzeret. Those are really powerful games. Are you just saying like the God-Pharaoh's Gift's faster?
I just think that like if we both get to like we're both for whatever reason we're both running unopposed. I think that their end game is going to trump our end game because among other things, I don't know, because they've got the Marauder, right? Like in the Marauder and the stick the Marauder with the hasty Mogfin.
The Marauder is a 2/1. Why is it? That's like so fragile. Besides, like just Tezzeret that. Bing, +1, -1.
All right.
I
actually like this card a lot.
I want to Tezzeret my Muldrotha and get him for 11.
Yeah.
So what about Yawgmoth's Vial offering as a way to get your Muldrotha back into play? But ahead of schedule, maybe.
That card is very powerful.
Definitely.
We talked about that one extensively already.
Right, but getting back Muldrotha is like a legit card, and a lot of the stuff that would fuel Muldrotha in terms of like putting stuff in your graveyard can also fuel the Yawgmoth's Vial offering. So, I don't know. I just think that I suspect that there is a lot of power there. I don't know that you need to go so far as to be like, let's have our legend deck Kamal's Druidic Vow. Boom.
So
I also just want to play Landlord Elf decks.
Same. But just on the subject of big black cards, I just wanted to quickly jump back to one of your favorite cards to at least have been talking about these past couple of weeks. Lich's Mastery for a second. This card's existence just annihilates the entire approach to the Second Sun strategy, right? Like, what do they do?
I don't know.
Because
hopefully have a backup plan.
Well, the Mastery itself is hexproof, right?
Yeah.
So like, if it gets in play, like, better hope they've got, better hope they've got a
demonic tutor out of their sideboard.
Yeah, but I mean, like, some decks have got like Torrential Gearhulk in the main deck or something, or I don't know, maybe they can run you out of cards with Ibnu Rivulet or something. But like, I'm just thinking like this entire wing of decks that has been, somewhere between Fringe and Grand Prix winning for the last 10 months or whatever, I just think is largely invalidated by the presence of this card. Like, even as a sideboard card, it's so powerful against them. Because if they don't see it coming, they're not going to interact with it very well. I guess they can just, like, censor it, but...
So wait, where's your... what's the deck you imagine... what's the deck that you want to put this in the most?
Well, besides, like, you've just brewed up a bunch of potential Lich's Mastery decks, right? Like, those are potentially going to be metagame players, right? Which will be in opposition to the existing approach decks. But I think, like, decks that have the... what's the name of the...
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to sort out, are you talking, like, dedicated Lich decks or just Lich...
No, just the existence of the card, right? So, like, what's the name of the card that is the Diabolic Tutor that's also the Wish? Like, you could just play a Lich's Mastery somewhere, and like...
Oh,
like,
okay.
Like, good game, brah. Like, just going to get this... like, because the turn that they tap out, right? They're like,
but
down.
Why don't they have Cast Out? Oh, Cast Out's not going to help.
It has Hexproof.
Hexproof, right, yeah.
Like, it's real tough if they don't have, like, some substantial way to... damage,
Maybe. I mean, for instance, is there any chance that we're going to see the approach decks potentially embracing something like Hour of Revelation?
It's been
right?
in and
That's
out of those decks. I think that the problem with Hour of Revelation...
Or Urza's Ruinous Blast?
The problem with those kind of cards is, I think a lot of the time when you want those kind of sweepers, it's weirdly in a situation where you also want to have a lot of permanence, right? Like, think about the decks that you want to do an Hour of Revelation to. Oftentimes, they're the same decks that you want to have a first turn Authority of the Councils against. And I think that's like been really like, well, I can't get to the point that I can cast this other card if I don't have this card. But if I blow it up, I'm definitely dead after it resolves. Is a difficult situation to be in if you're the approach guy.
Dude, not every problem in this world is best solved by Authority of the Consuls.
I agree.
I don't know.
I'm saying that if you're going Hour of Revelation, you might want to shop at a different store. Because those two cards aren't friends at all.
They're not the best of friends, but they're not the worst of friends either. You're not losing that much value. 1 mana worth.
The first tournament I ever won with Approach, I just got handed the Approach deck, which had both of those cards, and I just wasn't thinking. I never played it before, right? So I signed these cards in, and I'm looking at the Hour of Revelation that I want to cast against Mardu vehicles, because like they have so many different kinds of permanents, you can't just beat them with Fumigate, right? So like they've got whatever Heart of Kirin, and they're getting guys back from the graveyard, and they might do all kinds of nasty stuff to you. And I'm like, I really want to cast this Hour of Revelation, but the only reason I'm alive is that I have 2 Authority Councils in play. It was a crazy time last summer. A crazy, crazy time.
Dicey. Hey, so speaking of demonic tutors, though, final parting, 3 black sorcery, search your library for 2 cards, put 1 into your hand and the other into your graveyard, then shuffle your library.
Wow.
What do you think, man? Like, it's sort of a gifts ungiven, right? In a way, right? Like, it's... But how deterministic it is kind of interesting. You can just final parting, go get your reanimation thing, like go get your Liliana, or your Vial, Yawgmoth's Vial Offering, and then also go get 1 copy of the right Fatty. So it's an Entomb and a Demonic Tutor. Right, like Entomb is a Demonic Tutor as well, but being able to Demonic Tutor for the Fatty you want and to not have to overload your deck with 1,000,000 Fatties, but you can just have like a couple that are the best ones in this spot, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the pretty pro-scripted ways to play the card, obviously to pair that way. I mean, another way that you could look at it is like maybe you have so any deck like this, any deck that's playing a card like this is probably going to have some bullet elements, right? Like singletons for certain matchups because you can go get them. Like you've got this tutor capability. Maybe at least as a corner, getting a card you never want to draw and putting it in your graveyard is a thing that you can do.
You are always looking for the fair way.
I love
get a 1% decrease in drawing, the Abrade that's not good in the spot or whatever.
I always have the uncastable in my opening hand. Every time.
Another kind of cool little interaction. So if you've got your Liliana in play, which incidentally works really well with Gardener, because of the self-mill as well. But like, if you've got your Liliana in play, you can play this. And now that you don't have to go get your Liliana, you can go get 2 whatevers you want, get 1 into your hand, and then the 1 in your graveyard, get back when you Liliana reanimate your Garna, and then you just get the card back that you had lost to this. Right? Like, do you see what I mean? Like if you've just got Garna already in your graveyard, or if you just have 10 mana.
Yeah.
If you just have 10 mana, just go get Garna and whatever else you want, and then you just get a little value.
You're just like drawing like 3 cards.
Dude, or if you just have like let's just say that you just have I don't know, we'll just call it an even 15 mana. You can just go get Garna, and you can just put in your graveyard the legendary frog himself, Yargle, Glutton of Urborg, and then you can just get back Yargle from your Karna, and then replay your Yargle and immediately attack for 9. Boom!
Patrick, I mean, as much as I like Yargle, right?
9/3 vanilla. Legendary frog spirit uncommon.
I'm just wondering if we've got that much mana, we can't do something better than Yargle.
Legendary frog spirit.
Do you ever read those Walt Simonson comics from the 80s when Thor was a frog, but even as a frog, he was worthy enough to carry the hammer? That's a real story.
Awesome. I'll have to check it out. I don't know. I don't think the Yargle's got enough to really get there. But there is a
0% chance that I'm tutoring for Yargle. I'll tell you that.
Raf Capuchon, Ship's Mage, is 2. I can only assume this is 2 black and a green for a 3/3 flying flash. You may play historic spells as though they had flash. Since obviously this could be a mono blue card, they would never make it as a blue-white card. The most natural thing to do is make it a black-green card.
Well, obviously.
No, it is a blue-white card, weirdly. It must be,
They must have
Numbers Crunch or something. Numbers Crunch or something, I'm sure, because it would be really weird to not do this as a black-green card. But, nevertheless, now that it's here, what do you think about Raf Capuchon, specifically with the ability to, you get a little, you get like a little bit of a Restoration Angel without the best part, but you can play your artifacts as though they had flash. You can play your enchantments as though they have flash. You can play a saga on your opponent's end step, get the first trigger, then untap, and you're already at chapter 2.
I think I have a hard time believing that this card is going to survive the cullings that will make a standard deck 60 or 75. Problem with it is, so do you want this ability? Obviously, it's a really powerful card, but it doesn't have, when Teferi, made a lot of things have flash, they gave Teferi a 4th toughness and another ability to make it protected. Raf Capuchon is on the wrong side of a Braid, on the wrong side of Lightning Strike. What point are you casting this? Like, even if you cast it, let's say, on turn 6, so that you can get your Saga or your Treasure Map or whatever out with, I guess, a little bit of value.
Treasure Map?
I'm just thinking of a card you could
value.
Cast on turn 6.
That's not how value works.
All right. I don't know. Whatever you're imagining, right? That wrap.
How about this? You can flash it down on your opponent's turn, untap, and now you have the shields up, and you're continuing the beatdown because you're playing some kind of a blue-white flash deck. Is this somewhere between Restoration Angel, Vendilion Click, and Archangel Avacyn? Maybe.
No, it's not. It is not a triangulation of those 3 cards. I think it's closer to, what's the one that's like UU 2/3/3 when it comes to Spirit, when it comes into play, tap a creature? What's the name of that? I think it's closer to that card. And it has none of those abilities.
Okay, so let's just suppose that you have a Lion's Eye Diamond in play, right? And then let's just suppose... Okay, no, I'm just going to stop now. I think that flashing stuff down might be fancy, and there could be some cool interaction, particularly flashing down a Saga. But, man, is 3/3 for 4 a tough way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, 3 for 4 has been fine and constructed before, but typically it's been paired with some kind of ability to dodge removal, some kind of ability to, immediately exchange with somebody else's permanent. Like, not just having a fancy ability. Like,
Dude, what's going on with Sylvan Awakening, by the way? Just asking for a friend. 2 and a green, sorcery until your next turn. All lands you control become 2/2 elemental creatures with reach, indestructible, and haste. They are still lands. How rude.
Wasn't there one that was like this but an instant? But didn't have all those other abilities. It just made 2/2s.
Wasn't there one like this that untapped all your land?
There might have, but it might have had entwined.
Reach.
Yeah, how important is reach if on a sorcery?
No, I'm just saying, reach. It's like a tree, man.
Yeah, I'm just saying, what does it matter if you have reach if it's a sorcery?
It's until your next turn. So it can be a preemptive fog, right? You don't have to attack with them.
Oh. I wasn't reading it that way. Why would I ever want to do this? That's just like a corner case that I build into my deck that I might want to fog someday? All right.
They fancy.
I mean, maybe you could combine this with the, some sort of Armageddon effect, right? Where you get to keep your guys because they're indestructible. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of fancy.
That's a lot of mana. But let's say you got 9 mana.
Yeah.
And you drop that, and then you Fall of the Thran instead of attacking for 12. You fall of the Thran, and now all your lands are indestructible and nice.
So if I have a second Sylvan Awakening and I've executed this, probably they're going to get in the next turn. That's my guess. My opponent doesn't have any lands.
So obviously, Fall of Thran has some Armageddon aspects, like namely playing it, but it's not like there's more ways to get your land back than just Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Each player returns 2 land from their graveyard. To begin with, if you have Fall of the Thran, imagine if, like, for instance, you could float mana and then, like, scavenger ground your opponent, right? Like, you drop scavenger ground them, and they don't have any land to get back. Or alternatively, what if you used one of the, remember how there was some of that cycling land, and then 3 and a green, get back all of the lands from your graveyard?
Yep.
Well, there's a new way to get land back from your graveyard, the Mending of Dominaria. 3 green, Saga. Chapter 1, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Chapter 2, same as the first chapter. Chapter 3, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield and shuffle your graveyard into your library. All of them come onto the battlefield untapped. That's kind of interesting, right?
This card's pretty cool. I mean, like, as far as, like, a grinder card, like, I think this card could be valuable from a grinding perspective.
But getting back all your land, like, you can time these sagas, right? Like, if you play the Mending on turn 5, then on turn 6, you use the Chapter 2 of the Mending of Dominaria, and you cast Fall of Thran, destroying all the lands. And then on turn 7,
you get everything back.
All of your land back, and your opponent's at 2. And then even when they go up to 4, you just have so much. It's like you wildfired in some ways.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it depends what creatures you're getting back on chapters 1 and 2. You got to do something, like, if you got a window like that, you got to do something devastating to them, because this is pretty hard to set up, right? Like, this isn't tricky.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't know. You're gonna have to get paid a lot. Dropping the 5 mana card not affecting the board, and following it up with the 6 mana card that only destroys land is it can be profound, but it can also be a good way to get the heck beat out of you if your opponent's just attacking.
Yeah, if you're behind, you're going to be really, really far behind. And if you're not behind, like, what's the chances your opponent can't interact with these sagas? That's the problem.
Yep.
But, if we pull it off, that is just...
Okay. There's one more.
Johnny Heaven. All right.
There's one last card. This is the one that... God, this is one I think that'll really resonate with you. Growth from the Ashes. 2 and a green sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. Untapped, I might add. But wait, there's more. Kicker 2, if the spell was kicked, instead search your library for 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield. So this is a 3 mana rampant growth, but it gives it to you untapped, right? So you don't get the sick turn 2 thing going, but every other turn it's mostly the same, except you get the color immediately instead of having to wait until next turn. But you have the bonus of turning it into an explosive vegetation for a mana more. Right?
Yeah, so this is really powerful. So go for the Ashes on turn 3, get an untapped red or black, depending on what your other color is, and then have, like, a push or a magma spray or that new burst lightning open to defend yourself, right? Which is kind of cool. And then separately, I mean, I am willing to pay 5 for an explosive vegetation that gives me 2 untapped lands. Like, that is, we're now talking with...
And that's the kicker mode. You can also do it the other way, right? Like, those are both good options.
Oh, yeah, but, like, just setting up with, like, Hour and, like... I mean, can you imagine the grinding deck that you can make with this? Like, with Arch Like, you just,
I had a feeling you would do it for me.
yeah, I mean, this is not a hard way to scope out. We're gonna have some removal. We're gonna have a bunch of ramp, and then we have to have, like, when you have all that mana, you have to have like some big way to win. That's the thing, right? So no uncounterable creatures. So we'll have to figure out something else to win with. Maybe, probably. I hate to say that it's approach.
What do you mean? What do you mean? No big uncounterable creatures? There's big uncounterable creatures.
I want an Ulamog. I don't want somebody who plays nice.
Depends on what you consider playing nice. So to begin with, do you think Nezahal, the Primal Tide, plays nice? That's uncounterable.
I was thinking like maybe a Multani, maybe.
Sure,
that's
sure. That's good with all the land. Good with all the land, definitely.
The only problem is if you're like playing a Multani, man, you do not want to be on the wrong side of the Scarab God. That is like an impossible situation. So what you're saying is your deck is designed to give me an unbeatable threat. Thank you. How's that land doing?
I felt I felt shades of Eric Lauer a second ago. That's totally an argument he would make and be right.
Oh, no, he was right. I mean, how many years did I try to do clever things to Eric Lauer? He once said to me, he said, we were testing for extended PTQs, and he just looks at me, and he puts a Thawing Glaciers down on the table, and he says, what turn do you think I'll miss my first land drop? That's the question he asked me. I'm like, never? He's like, that invalidates your entire strategy. Next.
Well, no, it's interesting you should say that, though, because Eric also played a Thawing Glacier against me the first time I played him in a tournament. And this is the first time I ever met him.
Yeah.
But he didn't say all that. He said, I am really jealous of your side of the table after I Dark Ritual Necroed.
When I first played Eric, we were in the finals of a PTQ. Luckily, it was a 2 slaughter. We were 2 of the 3 people smart enough to have Necropotence in our decks.
Yeah, no, Eric broke that format. He was the one who invented the Ice Age alliances. Well, a story for another day. Dude, a lot of Dominaria, super excited. And now that we've got it all, I can see that it is definitely dope. Cannot wait to play with these cards.
Agree with everything you just said.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, it's a jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. The game, the love,